What's going on, people? Let's talk about CM Punk, right? There's a lot to say there, depending on who you ask. A lot of people have some very strong feelings, and they come from all directions, all ends of the spectrum, right? I've said before, and actually I probably didn't even need to say it because I've done many CM Punk shirt unboxings, a couple figures here and there, right? I have a poster over there of the dude, right? So yeah, I'm obviously a fan of him, right? And it's been that way for some time. So back in, when was it? I guess maybe 2011, I guess? Maybe 2010? Somewhere around there, when I was getting back into wrestling, because, you fall in and out of it sometimes, depending on how you are, and where your interests go. So I was getting back into it, and I saw this little thing between him and Kevin Nash, and he's like reading some text message from his sister, like, oh, she says, oh my god, Kevin Nash thought he was dead, lol, something like that, right? And I was like, this guy's pretty funny, because he delivered it in a way better way than I just did. So I was like, oh, this guy's pretty alright, whoever this person may be. And then I start paying a little bit more attention to him, because, again, I'm still learning about who the people are on the Raw nowadays. Well, then days. So there was that, right? And so I go on for a while, and I didn't really look too much into it, just thought, okay, this guy's gonna entertain me. But then you fast forward, like, a little while later, he was kind of, like, doing pretty well, and then he left, right? And it was like, oh, well, that's unfortunate, but I'm sure he'll be back soon, right? No, not even a little bit, because that was almost 10 years, as they kept saying on TV. I mean, it was like 7 years between when he came back to AEW, right? So that whole time, everybody, like, he'd get the chance every so often. He was still selling a lot of shirts on Pro Wrestling Tees, right? I've bought numerous ones of them. Though this right here is actually like my first WWE made CM Punk shirt. Crazy, right? I wasn't buying a lot of wrestling shirts back then. Nowadays, you wouldn't believe what my closet looks like unless you've watched my videos in the past. Either way, so I see him, he's gone, he's still in the media and stuff. Did a little UFC thing, didn't go so great or whatever. And then you start hearing later, like, the rumblings of him possibly coming back to wrestling, and I'm like, oh, well, this could be great, right? And he comes back to AEW, it's like, seems like a big thing, I was pretty into it, And I'll talk more about AEW later, but it just feels like that whole thing did not work out in the way that it should have, right? It didn't even come close. It got some good numbers here on some shows or whatever. There were some cool moments here and there with, like, different people. But I feel like ultimately, when you're looking at his career or whatever, you're probably not going to look back at that and be like, oh, let's talk about some of his AEW era. No, it'll probably be, like, down under, like, the Ring of Honor stuff, right? So not saying it was bad, it's just like it wasn't the most memorable, and I attribute a lot of that to just the AEW thing. And obviously, like, booking wise. And obviously there was also some other stuff, the controversies and whatnot, which I've addressed in a past Pro Wrestling Crate video, I believe. So, like, when he got fired or whatever, I was like, I know there's been some negative publicity here, but who am I, right? I'm on the way outside of this. I only hear what people make you hear, right? Whoever's controlling the narrative of the words that get out into the public, that's what I'm hearing, right? So I've never heard his side, might never hear his side. So I was just like, you know what? I'm going to assume that there's another side of this story that would make a lot of this make a lot more sense. And until I get that, I'm just going to keep liking the dude because whatever, right? And a lot of people were amongst that same thought process. So cool for me, cool for you, whatever. If you were on the other side, hey, that's cool for you too. Do whatever, right? It's your life, live it however. So then when he starts talking about, like, well, not he, but people start talking about he might come back into, like, the WWE system, I was like, oh, that could be interesting, like, it would make a lot of sense, because he's kind of back, and, like, he could probably get a lot more money in a way now because or make a lot more money now because of just the way things go or whatever. But I was still kind of doubtful, right? But then when it happened at Survivor Series, I remember I was back in Iowa for Thanksgiving, and his music hits, and I'm like, is this really gonna happen? And then he came out, and I was like, wow, it is happening. Look at that, that's amazing, right? And then it was going pretty well, did the whole Royal Rumble thing. I'm fast forwarding a lot, right? Did the whole Royal Rumble thing, like, leading into that, his stuff with Seth Rollins and how he wants to do all that stuff. got into it with Cody Rhodes a little bit. And I'm like, man, this is looking like the perfect storyline. Like, you couldn't have like made this any better. Like, thanks to Tony Khan for like pushing him away at the right time or whatever. Now here we are. We're gonna get to see something that's probably gonna be talked about for a while. And obviously, the way things have played out, it's gonna be something that's talked about for a while, but not in any way how I thought it would be, right? Because the whole injury thing, right? Because it was looking really good. You know, I'm thinking, okay, he lost the Royal Rumble, but as people pointed out on the internets and such, it's like, hey, but he still got a second chance. You know, the cage thing, Elimination Chamber, right? There's still that. He could win that and then go on and still main event WrestleMania on a different night, right? Because they have 2 nights, so all hope was not lost until it was. And so he comes out the next night, does the whole thing about his arm and how it's all messed up, and then Drew McIntyre comes out, reminds everybody how it's his fault that he did it, you know, because he wished for it and it happened, you know. So, weird. Side note, a friend of mine posted like a little clip of like like a picture of CM Punk and saying the whole thing that John Moxley said, like, what's the fragile mind, fragile body, like weak mind, weak spirit or something. I don't know, something like that, right? And people are just like getting all over her in like the comments, like, oh, how can you say this? Like, he just got injured and like that's mean and stuff. And it's like, I would imagine, right? And I'm not trying to defend anything people are saying because I don't know why she said it or what her full intentions were, but it's knowing her. It's probably one of those things where it's like, yes, she's not a fan of the guy, so she's going to point that out again because it makes sense to point that out right about now. But as a human being, she probably has some sort of compassion for like, oh man, like this guy is injured and like the thing he likes to do, he can't do it. Probably anybody's going to feel sad about that, probably, unless the person is just like did it on their own doing, was a terrible person going into it, right? You know, I mean, if some mass murderer like breaks his arm, you're not gonna feel bad, like, oh man, he can't go murdering people anymore, right? You're just gonna be like, good. CM Punk is not a mass murderer though. Quite the contrary, actually. So anyways, getting back on track here. When CM Punk came out and they did the whole thing and talks about how like it's not gonna be this year, maybe next year, whatever. It sucks, right? Because I was looking at it and part of me is, I'm not gonna say I'm relieved, but like I was thinking about like putting down a fair amount of money to go to WrestleMania and potentially Royal Rumble too, to go to WrestleMania because it's not far up the road or whatever. But now, like, that's certainly some money saved, but like I still wish that it had played out how I was expecting it to, with him going and being in the main event and stuff. Even if he didn't win against Seth Rollins, like, just seeing it, I feel like it would have been a really good match, and like just the momentum of everything, the timing, it was just like the perfect picture. But since it is wrestling and it's all predetermined and like set up or whatever, assuming he stays healthy and whatnot, they can twist this and kind of make some things happen for next year. They got some time to think about it. What will they do? Who knows, right? Again, it's like well over a year from now, and they're probably very focused on what's happening right now, but whatever. Wrapping this all up, putting a nice little bow on it or something. I am a CM Punk fan. I'm glad that he's back, right? I get that there was some controversy or whatever, and I'm ignoring it, honestly, because I haven't heard both sides of the story in full. Could he have carried himself better and some of the things he said and that like media thing or whatever? Sure, right? But at the same time, like, you're sitting there dealing with whatever injury he had, like, you got some dude up there asking some dumb question about something that he's covered before and already like doesn't like to talk about seemingly. Yeah, you know, it happens. So I would just say forget about it. Whatever, it happened. Move on. Now he's over here, and let AEW do what they're doing, right? And I'll talk about them a little bit later. I like them, the AEW thing, but man, I wish they were doing better. I truly do, because right now it is not looking good. But more on that at another point. From me to you, have a nice rest of your day or rest of your night, whatever it is, wherever you are. Got to talk about some shoes because I do shoe reviews once in a while. Some people might know that. Later, people.